Today on Hitting Your Stride, I have someone joining me who I have great respect for as a rider, a competitor, and a horseman. Matt Cohn has over 40 years of international experience representing Canada, including being a two-time Olympian and a team silver medalist, a member of the 2007 silver medal Pan Am team, and a consistent member on Canada's Nations Cup teams. In addition to the medals he's won, Mac has a long list of impressive horses he's been fortunate enough to partner with, including Alute, Koku, Melinda, Olay, and a beautiful gray mare named Zaya, and his up-and-coming horse, Con Coulier. I have had the pleasure of knowing Mac and working for him and his clients for about 20 years as a registered equine massage therapist. And in that time, I have had the opportunity to observe not only his skill and horsemanship in action, but also the partnerships he has had with so many talented horses. Mac, let me welcome you to Hitting Your Stride.
Thank you, Tracey. It's good to be here.
Yes, thank you so much. This is, I know you are a very busy man and show season has gotten started, so I appreciate you taking the time.
It's my pleasure. My pleasure.
Awesome. All right, so let's start it off. Let's say, Mac, what are 3 words that best describe you?
I can only pick 3.
Yeah.
I would say hard-headed, dedicated, and educated as far as horses go, educated.
Right. Okay. So can you elaborate on the hard-headed?
Well, you know me well. No, hard-headed, stubborn, wanting to do it my way, things like that. I think if you're confident in what you're being hard-headed about, then it's not necessarily wrong. Consistency and hard-headedness can kind of go together.
Right.
And I think a nice blend of being consistent and hard-headed about being consistent, it will make it a nice blend. How about that?
Yeah, that sounds really good. Basically, you don't give up. You've got something in your mind and you just keep pushing for it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And sorry, what was the second word?
Oh my goodness. Let's see. I would dedicated. I think it was dedicated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then educated.
They all kind of blend together, the dedication and the education, being educated in your field, the hard-headedness and the dedication, the education, that they all kind of go together.
Okay. And like we might touch on this in another question later on,
Sure.
But where do you think you got most of your education from? I know it's a lifelong learning, but where do you think it really started for you?
Well, we have a little time.
Yeah.
Well, when I was in my teenage years, even earlier, I always competed in sports. I was a sports guy. And I competed in many different sports: swimming, track and field, basketball, football, lots of things. Actually, football being my favorite, but as you know me well, I just didn't have the right physical attributes to go too far in that sport. But I've always loved it, still watch it. But the one sport that I did do consistently and didn't discard and go on to another one was the riding. I kept piddling away the best I could in Tennessee, which was not the hotbed of show jumping. So I was very lucky to have a good education in a private school all through high school. And I did 1 year of university, and I remember going and talking to my mother and told her I'm basically wasting my time and her money sending me to university.
Okay.
And she listened, and all she said was, "Get a job." All she said, 3 words I'll never forget: get a job.
Yeah.
So I fumbled through the horse magazines, and I knew I wanted to do the horses, not the schooling. And I made a couple of phone calls, but then I found one ad that George Morris had. It said, George H. Morris, Hunterdon, New Jersey. I have the right job for the right person, and a phone number. And I'd taken a clinic from George probably 6 months earlier, and I really liked it. And I was trying to find the best person available to go to, and he was definitely number one on the list. I called him and he remembered me, and he said, come on up. Basically he knew I could drive a tractor, muck stalls. He knew I could ride a little bit, but I was a strong guy that could help him build his farm that he was in the process of building, and
Nice.
I could hopefully get the lessons, and that's kind of how it went. That's how I got started. I went to the best.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you have a little bit of a background in dressage, don't you too, as like sort of the foundational flat work?
Well, that all started, and it went through George. He was responsible for heading me in that direction. There was none of that in Tennessee, of course, absolutely none. And then he headed me down that road. And we actually worked with a lady named Jessica Rowson, who was a very good dressage person. And we worked with her a bit. And then George got me, basically after being with him for a year and a half or so, I went to the US team, the United States Equestrian team. And their headquarters is in Gladstone, New Jersey. And I worked with Bert DeNimothy for about 2 years with Bert. So my first two trainers were George and Bert. And then he never was my official coach, but I watched him constantly and talked with him all the time. And he kind of took me under his wing unofficially. That was a gentleman named Rodney Jenkins, who was the man of the time back then, a very natural, gifted, unbelievable rider. He'd be known a lot to people more my vintage, my age group, Rodney Jenkins. And I would say between George and Bert and Rodney, those are my three real strong influences at the beginning.
Nice. Okay, so with those influences as they've developed you over the years, what are a couple of your most memorable career experiences and why?
Are we talking in the show ring or business?
Well, just whatever, like probably within the show ring or experiences, maybe not in the ring, but as you've developed. So something career experiencing for you.
Sure.
A couple of really memorable ones.
Well, and I probably should say this now so everybody can understand where my head is coming from. Everyone's position in the industry, if we want to call it an industry, in the sport, it's different because it depends on where you come from and what you've had to accept and what you've had to go through or not go through. And myself, I knew very early, like when I was 19, 20, 21, I knew I was going to have to be a professional. I was not going to be carried by my parents. I didn't have a backer of any sort that was going to carry me. It was only up to good old Uncle Mac here to get through this whole mess that I had decided to jump into. So that saying, I've always had to balance my career and my business, because my career and my love of the horses and dealing with the horses is my business. And so sometimes they go hand in hand together, and other times they work against each other. But you do have to, as they say, feed the family along the way. And that's what I've always had to do. Mm-hmm. So with that being said, memorable things, I would say one of the first memorable things was Mr. Morris telling me, I remember we were in the warm-up ring at Madison Square Gardens, and I must have been 20 years old. And he said, I've got you on the US team for the fall circuit. or actually the end of the fall circuit for the Toronto show. And I was just ecstatic that he
Wow.
was, that not only was he able to, arrange that I made it to the team, but also that the team wanted me. And I was quite young. And back then, the horses were donated to the U.S. team. And if you got accepted as a team rider, then there were horses there for you to ride, and they would carry you right along as long as they were horses and you wanted to stay with the team.
Wow.
So that was a very exciting situation.
Yeah.
The next year, I think I was 21, and I was named to the team to do the entire fall circuit. And I did ride a team horse named Triple Crown. And I had my own speed horse named Bomber that I used as my speed horse. And so I was able to do actually Harrisburg, Washington, New York, and Toronto. And they were, they were 3 Nations Cups, and we won all 3. And I rode with a guy my own age. He's a 1 year older, but a very famous rider now. Now he's retired from the show jumping, but Michael Matz.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Racetrack guy now. One of the greatest riders. He ended up being one of the greatest riders ever. Rodney Jenkins was also on the team, and a man named Frank Chapeau, who's quite famous. So it was Frank and Rodney, Michael, and myself. We were it was a pretty good team, and Michael and I were the babies at that point. Yeah.
So let's say fast forwarded a few years. Is there another career experience that jumps out at you? No pun intended.
Yeah, I'm staying with the show ring, aren't I? I'm not going to the business side of this. I'll give you one more show ring thing. The Olympics, of course, that's the highlight. But before that, I would say I bought a horse for 20,000 Canadian dollars named Pessimist.
Okay.
And I went looking for different people who would chip in and help me buy this expensive $20,000 Canadian horse. Didn't have much luck. And then anyway, we marched on, and he ended up winning what was at the point then was the big class of the Royal Winter Fair, was the World Cup. And that's when they had a 2-week Royal Winter Fair. And it was the final weekend was the World Cup, and you qualify in the afternoon, and then they had the big second round at night. And now they kind of put it in the middle of the week, but it was the big deal back then. And then Pessimist was the only double clean.
Wow.
And we're getting a typical house noises here. So hang on, are they going to quit? Yeah. So Big Ben was in the class, Kahlua with Lisa Carlson. They were some top, and that was also when we had Nations Cups at the indoors still. And so there are a lot of international people who were over with the teams, and this little $20,000 thoroughbred horse that I brought along from scratch, literally from, jumping 2 feet, ended up winning that. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that would be very special, very rewarding. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. So your career has seen its fair share of highs, and as in any career, especially with horses, a few lows. And if you stay involved in the sport long enough, you have to deal with issues of confidence. So can you talk about how you've had to deal with that as it relates to something specific that has happened during your riding career?
Not really. Confidence. How about if I explain how you get confidence? How about that? Would that help you at all?
Sure.
Can I change the question a little bit?
Sure.
I think the confidence that I have, that goes back to the hard-headedness and the dedication and the education, that all, like I said, comes together, and that'll give you the confidence that you need. If you can draw on being a strong person and a little bit crazy for sure, yet it's based on dedication with the education that a lot of people seem to miss on nowadays. The apprenticeship they cut short or they never have. Then that takes care of the confidence, because you're very comfortable with the tools of your trade. You know it so well, inside and out, that when it comes to the tight situations, you never waver or wonder what you should do or how you should handle it, because you already know way ahead of time before the what hits the fan. You'll know what you're going to do if it ever does, because you're so confident in your basics.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So no matter what happens in the moment, you've got that education and that experience that keeps you on track and focused.
That I should have an answer for just about anything that's thrown my way.
Wow.
Whether it's simply how to deal with a horse doing the XYZ, or how to handle a very high tension moment at the Hong Kong Olympics when something's not going the right way.
Right.
And everything in between.
Yeah.
That all comes from basically back to those 3 words: hard-headed, dedicated, and educated.
Awesome. Yeah, that is definitely thought provoking and some very good advice. Okay, so back to more good advice that I have heard you say. And I remember the day that I heard this quote that you gave. It was just an average day in the barn. I was there doing some massaging, and there was a horse that needed to be turned out, and he hadn't been turned out yet. And you said to your staff member, you said, "Hey, why isn't this horse outside?" And she apologized. She's like, "Sorry, Mac, I'm going to get him outside." And your response was, in order for a horse to be a special horse, it has to feel like a special horse. Is this a philosophy that you follow in developing horses, or is there more to it?
Well, the only thing to it is that I'm going to rephrase what I think I said to you.
Okay.
Was that if you want a horse to be a special horse, you have to treat it like a special horse.
Okay.
So what I was meaning to that person who was working for me was treating special. Why can't he be turned out first instead of last, or something simple like that? If you just go out of your way all the time to do special things for that horse, whatever you can possibly do. And I don't mean spoiling it with treats and things like that, but if that horse should only be probably worked fairly hard for 40 minutes, then you don't push it to 50, you cut it off at 40. Things like that. If he needs a good pet coming out of the ring, even though he knocked a couple of jumps down, if you felt him do anything better than he did the time before, if you can feel him trying, even though he's not succeeding, if he's trying, make a fuss over him, pet him a lot, let him know he is special. Little things like that. Not giving him sugar and candy and have him stand and bring his neck around to you in the middle of the ring and take the treat, and everybody thinks you're such a nice guy, not like that. No.
So basically the way that you do it helps actually better the relationship between you and the horse instead of bribing them with treats.
Well, I'm not saying it does it better, but it is just the way I like them to work hard for me, because I work hard every day. That's the dedicated word. And I like to slowly get them to drink the water.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're firm firm with them, but very fair. And then just keep asking new little simple things to add to the equation on a daily basis, and then review the old ones along with it, and constantly ask for small steps that they're more than capable physically and mentally handling. And then a lot of reward with good petting and everything. When you're through with the work, then it becomes a partnership.
Yeah.
It becomes a nice part. It's almost like you are the coach and the teammate wrapped up in one, and they are your teammate.
Right.
So you are a player coach. How about that?
Yeah.
You're a player coach and they are your teammate. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So another little bit of wisdom that I've come across and things that you have said is, so I'd be paraphrasing you with this, talking about, you know, being in the ring and maybe taking a bigger picture that might be overwhelming and trying to simplify it for yourself or for your students. So with this, I'm paraphrasing. So keep it simple in the ring. There are jumps and there are questions. Find the answers. Does this simplicity work as well for your riders or with your riders as it does with you when you're riding?
Well, what you are referring to when I talk about how to break down the difficulty of a course that's given to you? Is that what we're talking about? Yeah. Okay. I do try to keep it simple myself, really simple. And I do try to encourage my riders to think in a very simple way also. I'm not always successful in that way because all the riders don't drink the water as well as they should. And a lot of these newer generation folks don't think in the same way as us older folks think. Whether it's the way they're being brought up now or the way I was brought up back then, I do find it's a little bit different now. I'll put it that way. But when it gets right down to it, I think, let me put it this way. I think while I'm on that subject, I'm breaking the subject a little bit. I think when we were in Hong Kong and the whole 2 years that Eric and Jill and Ian and myself were together, and we were trying to get ready to do an Olympic Games and not just do it to be there, but do it to bring home some chunks of metal. When we were really trying to do it, Eric was our baby then. He was 40 years old and he was our baby. Ian probably might have been in his early 60s, and Jill and I were definitely in our 50s. Well, I could figure it out. It was 2008, whatever. We weren't a bunch of kids over there. We were all gritty and older and been up and down the highway and thrown up and down the highway, sometimes rough highways. But we knew we all thought the same way in a very rugged, gritty sort of way. I'm finding that is what I'm seeing is a little bit different with some of these, not all of them, but a lot of the kids now. I don't want to say entitled, but maybe I am saying entitled. I think some of the grittiness and the willing to go that extra, not 1 mile, but extra 5 miles or 50 miles, and realize that it isn't all pretty. And what isn't easy too damn bad. You got to keep trudging away. Nobody told Ian Miller that it was going to be easy. And then when it was hard on Ian Miller, you didn't see him complaining. Have you ever seen Ian Miller complain or Eric complain or Jill? No. So anyway, back to your question. The courses are very intricate now, but it's still, the basics are the same as they've always been, even when the courses weren't quite as complicated as they are now. The one thing that is different is the time allowed are now quite tight. So that's a new phase. It's really made it a little bit of a different sport. When we were starting back in the 70s and 80s, we did mainly thoroughbreds, and you could not go this fast on those thoroughbreds. They would lose their noodles. They just couldn't do it. And we never had this wonderful animal called the warm blood to deal with at all. So that's been something that some of us older folks have had to adjust to, because a lot of all the kids nowadays, they never sat on these hot thoroughbreds or anything like that. All they know is these wonderful warm blood machines that they have to deal with now, and learning to go that fast right from the start. The coaching is so good now, they will teach this right from the start, that it's very more natural for some of these young folks to go that fast now without it even being anything strange at all. So that's one thing, is the time allowed. But back to your question again, is you can only, if there's, let's just say there are 14 numbered jumps on course, you can only jump one of them at a time. And if one is by itself, then it's all you have to do is think of one, then go on over to two. Now you have to go over to two very quickly, but you just break it down. If 2 to 3 is related, then that is a problem. And if 3 to 4 is related, that is a problem. But usually the problems calm down, and then you have a turn or an angle or something to something else. But you can only, what I'm getting at, you can only do one jump at a time and one distance problem at a time. Now, if there are 3 or 4 of them all hooked together, they will keep coming up, and you have to deal with them fairly quickly, but you still can only do them one at a time. So if you look at the whole course as one big problem, it can be quite overwhelming. It can be quite overwhelming. But if you just break it up and say, okay, one's by itself. Can you go jump that course? I can't go jump one. Now off you go. And then just break it up to all until you get to 14, but you don't combine 1 and 14 and everything in between all together. Just break it up how you're going to do it all. And then nowadays you have to do it fairly quickly because of the time allowance.
Yeah.
It was Leopoldo Palacios, who course designer, who really saw the future. He knew he didn't want to and couldn't really go much bigger and much wider than he already had. And every facility around the world isn't like Spruce Meadows, where you have grass and all those different individual little funny jumps that they can throw in. That makes a huge difference. A lot of the sets of jumps are reasonably generic, with some panels and rails and maybe a wall. And this, not like Spruce Meadows, where they buy all the specialty jumps from all the championships, end up at Spruce Meadows.
Right.
And they can pull those things out at any point. With every competition isn't like that. So in order to separate these horses and riders from each other, he decided that tightening up the time allowed was the way to do it. Add the tight time allowed to the problem.
Right.
So it forces the riders to ride quicker and faster and train quicker and faster than they had ever before. And then therefore, like any sport, when you're forced to do it a little quicker and faster than you want to, bad things happen.
Right. Yeah, that's when things can get tricky.
That's when bad things happen.
Yeah.
And so Leopoldo, being the #1 course designer in the world for quite a few years, got the other course designers to slowly drink the water. Now they're all lunatics, and they make the time allowed so tight.
Wow.
And so you have to train different. You have to buy different types of horses. You have to really make that a part of the training for sure. For
Okay.
sure.
So along that line, then, when we're talking about the horses, who was one of the more challenging horses to bring along to the international level? And how did you get through to them? And what did you learn about yourself in the process?
Well, I would say probably I've had a lot of challenging ones. I don't want to go through this long list. None of them are easy to get to the highest level. There are lots of bumps along the road. I keep using that, but that's the way it is. As soon as you think you got the problem solved, then you go up to a higher level, trying to get to the highest level, and it's never easy. The one thing I have learned is that, and actually Danny Foster, who's an ex Grand Prix rider, and he was the chef of the team, and I was on one of his teams, and he told me this once. He said, you know, Mac, the slower you go, the quicker you'll get there. And I've never forgotten that, actually. It's really a very wise thing. And what he meant, you're better off going from level 1 to level 3 by going to level 2 first. Don't pop up to level 3 just because your horse is physically capable of it. You got to remember his brain has to be ready also. So if you go from 1 to 3 and skip 2, more than likely, you're not only going to come back down to 2, you're going to come back down to 1.
Right.
And then you have to stay at 1 till you undo all the bad things you put in that horse's brain because you went too quick. And then slowly get back to 3 by going to 2, and then finally you're at 3. Right. Where if you had just taken your time, and when you were happy with 1, then you go to 2 and live at 2 for a while, even though he's ready to jump number 3 size jumps. His brain isn't quite ready. And then when you finish the education at level 2, then 3 will be very easy for him. And you won't have to do any back steps. And then keep doing the same thing all the way up. So you're much better off having a bunch of little bitty steps heading in the right direction, which is up, and big steps up, and then steps back, and then big steps. And you'll get there a lot quicker just going slowly, and you'll get there before you know it if you do it very slowly. And then what that will allow is for the horse's brain, who sometimes isn't quite as educated as the human brain. Maybe sometimes they're a lot smarter. We just don't listen.
Right.
But if you give the horse's brain a chance to really figure this sport out, because it is something that they're not really naturally meant to do, that we have to make sure that their confidence in their heart and their brain is all ready to come to be your partner. And there goes back to the confidence thing. I never worry about my confidence, but I do worry constantly about my horse's confidence, because I know the sport inside and out. The horse does not know it inside and out. And each new horse that you start with, and I do that a lot because that goes back to what I said a while ago, was I'm in the business. So if you're in the business, what does that mean? It means you sell them.
Right.
And the most money you can get out of the horse is when they're at the top of their game, top of the sport, and somebody wants them. And then you want them real bad too, because you're at the top of your sport with your partner, and somebody wants to buy them. You're in the business, you have to sell them. So your bank manager is happy, but your career has taken a temporary setback.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. And but approaching this horse's education the way that you did, or with any horses that you're talking about, you know then that as it moves forward to its next owner, its next, journey, that it is confident. This horse has confidence. Am I correct?
Well, yeah, the main thing is when you're a professional, and it doesn't matter what horse it is or what level it is, you want the horse to go on and do well for the new owner. That is, that's the main goal, because you want repeat business.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a simple business fact. If you go to the Chevrolet dealer and the car falls apart, that's bad for business, right? They're going to go buy a Toyota next time.
Right.
But I want them to come back to Southern Ways. I want them to come back to Matt Cohn, and because they know I give them the right spiel on the horse, and they can trust that it is what I say it is. And one of my most recent sales that really echoes this. So I had a horse named Gasper, and
Yep.
Gasper Van Den Dorn, I think was his name. I just called him Gasper. And he was a funny horse. Bought him, I think, when he was 8, and he was probably doing meter 40 stuff. And I could tell trying in the trial that he was quite talented. But the more I fooled with him, I found, oh, this one has a mind of his own a little bit. And it all fitted together, though, at the end because of his start. There was a nice gentleman that owned the horse, but he wasn't a top professional at all, more of an amateur weekend warrior.
Mm-hmm.
But he bred the mare, raised Gasper himself, broke Gasper. The horse never knew anything but this weekend warrior rider. Nice gentleman, but that's all he ever knew. So Gasper, being the tough little guy that he wasn't, the tough horse that he was, I mean, tough in a good way, he had a lot of defense mechanisms kicked into his system. So meaning the rider asks me to do this and I'll believe half of it, but I'm going to do the other half my way to protect myself, because a lot of the buttons that were being pushed weren't accurate buttons. So he even broke my collarbone once on the way through sorting all this out. I asked a little too much one day, and he got mad and he just flipped himself right over and fell right on my shoulder because I was asking too much. I knew what he was capable, and I said, I want you to be mine right now. And he said, you know what?
Yeah.
And I learned a lot there. He'll be good, but he's going to be good when he's ready to be good, not when I want him to be good.
Right.
So this went on for quite a while. And then finally, we got to the point at the very high level, at meter 60 level, that I expected him to go clean when I went in the ring at the highest level. And that's when now the homework's done. Now we're going to have some fun. So we grade at the Royal, go down to Florida and start jumping clean rounds in the big Grand Prix down there. And sure enough, somebody comes up to me, wants to know if he's for sale, And of course I have to say, yes, he is. And they offered a lot of money. I said, no, not enough. And I kept riding, and then they kept watching, and then they finally came up with enough money. And so the horse was going to be tried by the new owner to be. Very nice young lad named Teddy Block. And he's actually just bought a horse from Mario Delorier, and he's riding for Israel. And he's a big favorite, one of the favorites for, the Olympics this year. But anyway, this was his first big time jumper. And when he tried Gasper, Gasper went beautifully for him. I mean, the trial, 2 trials, they were both unbelievably beautiful to watch. And it brought a tear to my eye. It still, still does, because it showed all that work and that partnership and me breaking through that horse's defense mechanisms one by one, chipping away, chip away, chip away, to finally, I got rid of all his defense mechanisms. And now I can say, now we're going to start learning together. I had to go right to rock bottom with him before I could go up. So that was a really interesting horse to deal with, because he was quite different that way, that I had to chip away all the old stuff first. And it took so long. But then once I had him, the proof was in the pudding when Teddy rode the horse and bought him, and ended up being Teddy's best horse.
Aw,
Yeah. So that was quite a,
that's amazing.
yeah.
Whew, that gave me goosebumps. Wow, that must be so rewarding. You know, even though you're taking the chance of, like, quote unquote, losing these great horses that you brought along, you're right, it's a business. So when it happens, at least you can feel confident and happy that that horse has a great career ahead of them.
Yeah. You can't help what your last name is when you're born. Mine happened to be Cone. Cone was born into this situation, and I had to go with what situation I was dealt with. Other people have different last name, and they have a different situation they're born in. Does it help if you don't have to do the business also? Maybe it helps you in some ways. Maybe it makes you a little stronger. If you're able, because of your certain last name, to get accessibility to better horses more easily, fine, that's the card you're given. It's no last name is right or wrong. I think what's right or wrong is what you do with the last name that you're given, and see where you can go with what cards are given to you, and say, okay, now this is what you got to start with. Now see what you can do with it.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so out of all of the talented horses that you have had, who is the one that you felt you had the most connection and understanding with?
Oh, that's a hard one. I guess if they weren't quite successful, it really doesn't count. I don't,
Yeah.
I don't think it counts unless they were quite successful and quite talented. In the hunter ring, I hate to go back there, but I will. In the hunter ring, I had a horse named Killer Tom. And I happened not to have a top jumper at that time, so I was able to give him lots of time. And I ended up with a connection with Killer Tom that was quite special, and we won a lot for a good 3.5 years, and ended up selling him, of course. But hunter wise, that was a partnership. That was a real partnership.
Nice.
I would say there've been, I counted it up once. I bet I've had somewhere between 30 and 40 meter 60 horses over the years. So it's hard to say, but probably the one that stands out the most would be Olay.
Yeah.
I would, and for a lot of reasons, but one way you could describe Olay, he was the little engine that you didn't think could pull the train up the mountain, but he'd end up being the first train up the mountain. And he didn't have the skill set that a lot of horses have. One was the length of his stride. He wasn't a long strided horse. He had to add in a lot of lines, like when you're talking about walking the course and figuring out how you're going to handle your problems. When we'd walk the course, I'd come out and I would say, okay, we're gonna do 6 strides and the 5 strides, and we're gonna do 8 strides and the 7 strides. And I have no idea what I'm gonna do in those other 2 lines, but I gotta make up my mind in the air.
Wow.
So in those 2 spots, and I'm serious, it all depending on how he would leave the ground and how I felt he was going to land and how far he was going to go. And in the air, I'd have to come up with my number, and I would do it that way. The one thing he had, thank God, that made him still be able to be a great horse, he had a big stride in the doubles and triples. And I have no idea why. Have no idea why, but he was never long in a double or long in a triple. But if you did a normal 5, it would be a long way. So you would do 6, and I have no idea. But he just went right to the top. I had him for quite a while and did a lot of meter 40s and 50s with him. And when I needed him to be my meter 60 horse, he said, okay, let's go. Yeah. I don't care. They're bigger. I don't care. They're bigger. And I remember walking some courses, especially one in Florida. It was very big, and Tracey was wanting me to go so he could watch Olay. And I said, Tracey, this course is not fair. It's ridiculous. There was a triple bar, and there were no holes left in the standards. Those cups from the very top, there were no holes left. And that was the back rail of the triple bar. Wow. Into this very difficult line. And I'd been around the block enough times to know that this was kind of crazy. And so one horse after a while went and got around okay. And Tracey looked at him and says, I think you should go. I think you're okay. I go, Tracey, you go, you're fine. So I went, and you know what? Olay went around that thing like it was nothing. There were only 4 clean out of the 40 or whatever, and he was one of them. Wow. He was just one of those. He was one of those that just, you'd want him on your basketball team. I'll put it that way. Well, he may be in the one that's going to dunk the ball all the time, but he'll figure out a way to win the game. You know? Nice. Yeah.
Well, I know from my point of view, you know, as his massage therapist for all those years, he was a special horse. Like I said, my point of view, we had a really awesome relationship, and he understood why I was there for him, to help him and keep him at his best. And so, yeah, I have very fond memories of him. That is for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So over the years too, when I have been at your barn and I'd show up and people would say, oh, Mac's gone shopping. So basically you've been over in Europe and you're shopping for horses, and you have often been approached by people to help them find horses that suit them, suit their abilities and their goals. And you've matched some amazing partnerships. What are some of the things that you have to keep in mind when matching horses and riders?
Well, a lot of it depends on what program they are going to. If they're going to an outside program where I'm not really involved, then that's a little trickier. If it's going to a program where I'm the coach and I'm involved in the program, my flexibility to different types of horses is expanded, because I know I'll be there to help the rider deal with something that might look wrong at the beginning, but give me a little time, and what looks so wrong maybe looks so right when we're done. Meaning meaning me, the student, and the pick that we made in Europe.
Okay.
Now, if I wasn't, say, as current as I am now, and if I couldn't get on and help make the horse through, the hard part is the beginning stages. Usually there are a few bumps along the way when you go up the ladder, but if you get a little bit of an odd duck that you really believe in for some reason, the beginning steps are really the tricky ones. So if I had somebody with me, but maybe wasn't going to give me the time with them that I needed and wasn't as dedicated or hardworking enough, I might change what I would buy for that particular person. And it wouldn't mean I'd be getting her or him. Let's say I wouldn't be getting that person the best horse, but I'd be getting it maybe in the easiest horse for the situation.
Okay.
How about that? But the most fun is when you have a rider that is drinking the water with you and totally trusting you, and they work really hard, and you maybe get at the beginning what looks like a bit of an odd duck, but in the end it's like an unbelievable horse, because you could see the forest for the trees. Is that a good way of putting it?
Yeah.
Right, you
Yeah.
didn't get stuck on all the trees. You could see the end result. That to me is when it's pretty cool. Yeah.
Awesome. That would be. So what kind of goals does Mac have for himself right now?
None. I've never had any goals.
Really?
My goal was to put food on the table.
Okay.
Put food on the table. And if your career happened to take a few good turns along the way, then that's gravy. But that's the way I've always had to do it. Have I sat up at night or sat out in the front yard on the lawnmower, finished cutting, and just sit there and think about where I'd like to go? Yeah, I'd be lying if I said I haven't done that. Do I write down on a piece of paper somewhere my goal and put it in a drawer somewhere? No, I don't do that.
Okay.
Do I have a blackboard that I write my goal on and I'll wait every day to do that? No. And you know why?
Why?
You know why I don't do that? Because the damn horses break.
They
break, and then you know what breaks next? Your heart. They break, and your heart breaks next. So you never plan too far ahead.
Yeah.
And you never set your goals anywhere. You let the horse. The only goal you would set is when you buy the nag. You say, this is where I want me and this nag to go. I love the potential of this horse, and I'm buying this horse because it has the potential to go where I want to go, And that's the talk. And then after that, you put your hand down and you just go to work.
Okay.
Every day, little steps.
Yeah.
If for some reason, God willing, they stay sound and they have the talents, and you're clever enough to start the partnership and continue it on up to the top, and nothing goes wrong too seriously to set you back too far, where you don't, and you get there, well, God bless you. That's the way that's good. But to get too wrapped up in it, they're just going to break your heart.
Yeah, I could definitely understand that. That is for sure. Yeah. All right. My goodness, this has been so amazing. I have one last question for you. In all of your years in the sport, what is the one thing that you have learned that is the one thing you try to pass on?
Well, the one thing that I always wanted to learn back in Tennessee when I had no knowledge was the knowledge. I wanted to be educated in the sport at the highest level. And between George Morse and Bert Denemethey was a genius. His flat work and the way he flatted horses and broke horses and trained horses. And when I say break a horse, I don't mean like cowboy break a horse. I mean, this is high level dressage without the piaffe and passage and all that. Just the way a horse should be balanced and turn and go forward and come back. And it was just beautiful. We'd sit there with our mouths wide open. He would get on a horse and he would walk it. He would walk it in an area as big as this carpet that I'm looking at in my dining room in front of me here. And he'd just walk it and walk it and walk it and turn and just do this. And then he would pick up the canter, leave that carpet, and had the most beautiful gallop, both directions around the ring. And then there'd be a jump out there and he'd just go over the jump, all from the wall.
Wow.
All from the wall. And I said, now that's the guy I want to ride like.
Yeah.
That's the guy I want to ride like. And then I see the people, the Billy Steinkraus and Chapeau and all those people who are the number one riders back. And I said, I want to be like that. I don't want to be a hacker at the medium level. I want to be there. I want to be where I can be on top. That's where I want to be. All right. And that's why I followed Rodney Jenkins around all the time. He was on top. He was the man. He taught me how a horse should jump. So when you take that picture, that's how a horse should jump.
Okay.
And I learned that from him. And that's what I try to pass on. Okay. There are very few people, though, very few people that drink the water enough to really get it. And I don't know why they don't want to really get it. I don't know if they're a little bit obstinate or stubborn, or they don't understand,
or impatient,
or whatever.
Yeah.
But I have a young lad that's with me now. His name is Adrian Lemieux. And he came from Quebec. He is from Quebec. How about that? And I told him, I said, Adrian, if you want to come with me and you really want to have a proper apprenticeship to be in this business and to also have to be prepared for being ready to be able to compete in the ring at the highest level you possibly can. I'll teach it to you, but I need 5 years. Don't look to go anywhere for 5 years. And he's got really nobody backing him at all except me. And I'm not giving him my horses, right? But slowly but surely, he's been with me almost 2 now. There have been some young horses. He's built almost identical to me. So he's a tall guy and slim. And some of these young horses are quite big. I don't do the young horses anymore. They got to be ready to really behave. I don't need to get bucked off and all that. He's taken these horses, and so he has 3 now, and he is really one of the few that I've had in a long time that are really daily drinking the water. Nice. Because he wants it so bad and he wants to do it well. I was recommended to him. He'd seen me ride before and we are a good match. And yeah, that's the kind of dedication. Whether he makes it or not, time will tell. What'll probably end up holding him back is getting enough good horses under him, because I'm going to take the best ones I can.
Yeah.
If I have Mr. Smith saying, Mac, get a horse for you. Well, it's not going to him, it's going to me.
Right.
But it's because of something here, there, because of the business, something like that, he's got 3 horses now.
Yeah.
Right. So, but he's there every day with a pitchfork in his hand all day long. He's there. He's honest. He's hard working. We'll see where it goes. But,
Nice.
but trying to find people like that, you know,
Yeah.
they're
It's hard.
few and far between.
Yeah. Well, I know one of my coolest memories back when you and I first met and you were still riding a Lute. Being a former dressage rider and really appreciating really good flat work, I remember you were out riding a Lute, just sort of riding him around the grounds at Caledon, and there was an open sand ring. And I swear you could have thrown down all those white letters and you were doing like some canter pirouettes or quarter turns. You were doing tempi changes. You were doing canter half passes. And I was just like, oh my God, that was just such an ingraining experience for me to witness that. And I think that's where my appreciation for your horsemanship really started to solidify itself. It was awesome.
Well, thank you. But that all goes back to George and Bert.
Yep.
Wanting to learn that. That's where, and then I kept over the years honing my skills, if you want to say. They taught me, you know, how to do it, but then you have to get better at doing it with different horses, and then realizing the importance of the flat work. When you have an animal that you've worked with and you've instilled all that good flat work, and it's dressage is what it is. You're teaching them. It's like you're turning a pickup truck that the power steering doesn't work great and doesn't have the greatest brakes and only a 4-speed transmission. You're trying to slowly turn that pickup truck into more of a sports car, a Ferrari. You're trying to give it a much better steering wheel. You're trying to give it much better brakes. You're trying to give it now an 8-speed transmission instead of a 4-speed. And all of a sudden you've made this pickup into a Ferrari. Yeah. Then now you're ready to start thinking about jumping this thing.
Yeah.
Because now you have it all ready to go around the course because you've spent your time with the dressage.
Yeah.
And the jumping, if the horse can jump, that's really the easy part. It's the dressage you spend a lot more hours, a lot more hours on dressage than you do on the jumping.
Yeah.
For example, I have the wonderful mare, and I hadn't mentioned her, but she's probably the most talented horse that I've ever had, is a mare named Zaya, a gray mare, and she's been a COVID casualty. Second season of COVID really getting in her way. She's had some silly bone bruising. She had a tooth that was cracked I didn't know about, all this stuff. And then I had her right at the top of the game and fought 5 stars last year in Florida, and then COVID hit. And then we just get going this year, and then we get back into COVID. You know, it just, so she's sitting here ready to roll. But when I was buying her, I knew she was a little tricky, and I knew the dealer, and he, Stefan Canter, and he let me ride her, I think 4 different times, 4 days in a row. Didn't bother me at all. He knew I wanted the horse. Usually you try a horse twice and you have to make up your mind. He gave me 4 days. And by the time I rode her the first time, I told her I'm going to need 1,000 hours of flat work. And then by the end of day 4, I went up to her and said, yeah, okay, we're going to go ahead and bet it. And I'm only going to need 850 hours. I was wrong. And I'll say now, she walks, trots, canters, gallops. Once she's settled at a show or at home, she does it right away. She's beautifully broken. Now you point her at a jump, you got chaos. She's an odd duck that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's a lot of hours. When you think about that, 1,000 hours, that's riding a horse every day of the year for 3 years. Well, that's not that far off when I said 1,000 hours.
No.
I was serious, right? So anyway, look out for Zaya. She might be the best one I've ever had.
Awesome. We will definitely do that. Oh, Mac, this has been amazing. This has just been so much fun. And over all these years of knowing you, I have always enjoyed the opportunity to just listen to those tidbits of information and advice and all sorts of wisdom. This interview is amazing. So to all of you listeners out there, I have been privy to Mac's insight and friendship for years, and I am so grateful that I have had the chance to share him and this conversation with all of you. Thank you for taking the time to join me, Mac, and sharing your distinct and special way you think about horses, horsemanship, and some of your experiences you've had. I wish both you and your clients a successful show season. Where can the listeners get in touch with you if they would like to reach out for any questions?
Oh my goodness, on I guess my website is a Facebook website. I don't really do it.
That's okay. It's Matt Cohn Southern Ways, right?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll put all of your contact information in the show notes. And yes, thank you so much for this.
My pleasure. It was fun. We had a good time. Thanks, Tracey.